All right. So today we are so excited to have retired law enforcement officer David Berez. We are here on The Power of Our Story. My name is Sara Correll. I'm the founder of this. And the reason why we started this tribe is because so many people are doing transition. They're doing retirement alone. And we would not do active service if we're in the military. We would never do it alone. We would never be on a police force and always act alone. So this tribe is to be able to finish that work of really being together, supporting one another, and having a place, just a landing spot if people need to process their story. If they really feel like they need to share something that other people will really get it, people who will get it. So I just want to welcome everybody here today and everybody who will be listening later. Again, I want to introduce David Berez. So for nearly 3 decades, David Berez has dedicated his life to safer communities and serving others. It's a mission he continues through the work of 6'4" consultants. During his police career, he has served the public in many capacities, including primary officer in charge, field training officer, the elite proactive squad, bike patrol officer, DARE instructor, evidence technician, drug recognition expert, and multiple detachments to the Investigative Services for special assignments. David has been recognized as an expert witness in multiple jurisdictions for his knowledge and expertise in drug-related DUI cases. He also served in a number of special detachments. The most notable include rescue efforts at the Ground Zero World Trade Center site following the terror attacks on September 11th, 2001, the New Jersey Drug Recognition Expert Association, the Mercer County Rapid Response Partnership, the Violent Crime Task Force, and as a school resource officer. And I'm just so happy to welcome you, David. David is somebody in our Thursday night group, in our first responder coffee and conversation group that we have all just grown to love. And so now we finally get to hear his story. So David, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I appreciate everybody's attendance, and hopefully you find my experience, especially as it relates to 9/11, to be interesting. I'm certainly open to any questions that anybody has. I have no holdbacks at all. Hopefully I'll get through a lot of it, and I'm sure there'll be some questions towards the end. But if there's something that I'm talking about that you think is interesting to you, that you wanted me to get deeper into, just feel free to ask in the process, and we can certainly do that. I did prepare a bunch of notes, so I'm going to go through the whole thing. But in the meantime, if you have questions about what we want to talk about, I'd be happy to entertain it and break this up a little bit. So I really appreciate Sara's intro. It's probably it's often hardest to hear about yourself when you're in a group of other people like that. And I know Chris has said that in the past as well. So when you hear about yourself, it's kind of strange, it's kind of off-putting. But so I'm glad you're all here. And just a little bit additional background on myself. I live in New Jersey. I grew up in the Princeton area in Mercer County, and we're about 40 miles southwest of New York City, just for some geographic perspective. And we're 45-minute to an hour car drive from downtown Manhattan, from where I grew up. And I worked in the same town I grew up in. I had a childhood connection to New York. My aunt lived on the Upper West Side, and we went into the city often. It was a place that was a second home to me. We spent probably 2 or 3 weekends a month there doing different things, whether it was shows or whatever New York had to offer. And then I went to college at Hofstra University, which is on Long Island, just on the other side of the east side of the city. And I spent many weekends, partying and doing whatever college kids do in Manhattan when they're at school on the other side. When I graduated college, I had an internship at the New York City Medical Examiner's office in the Manhattan office. And my supervisor there was an investigator. His name was Shia Rabowski, who at the time, he was probably 6 or 7 years older than me. My relationship with him at that time didn't mean anything, but you'll see why I say that in a little bit. And super nice guy. He basically took me around the city like this little kid when I was his intern there at the medical examiner's office. We had a ton of fun, and I learned so much from that experience. But we'll get back to him in a little bit. So I was hired at East Windsor PD in December of 1999, East Windsor Police Department in 1999. And I was pretty much a shift patrol officer working rotations of nights and days. We worked 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And on September 10th of 2001, I was assigned to night shift. So I was working the night of September 10th into the morning of September 11th. And come 6 o'clock in the morning, my day or night was over. Got in my car, said goodbye to my squad mates, my partner, Bart, and went home. Got into bed. My sister, who is very close with me, knew what my work schedule was. And she's calling me at like 7:15. And I'm like, what is she doing? Like, she knows I'm trying to go to sleep. So I pick up the phone, I'm like, what do you want? And my sister's like, do you have the TV on? I'm like, why would I have the TV on? I'm going to sleep. And she's like, you need to turn the TV on. So I was like getting all pissy at my sister, but I turned the TV on. I'm like, holy cow, this is what's going on here. She's like, I don't know. All I can say, she's in Virginia. So she was 6 hours away from me. She said, whatever, just be safe. Whatever happens from here on forward, just be safe. I'm like, got it. So I hung up the phone. I spent a few more minutes watching the news. And something just wasn't right, as we all know. And I got back dressed, got my bags, got back in my car, and headed right back to work, which was about 15 minutes away. Pulled in the parking lot of work, and my partner Bart's pulling in the parking lot at work at the same time. And I'm like, what are you doing here? He goes, what are you not doing here? Like, why wouldn't I be here? And I'm like, all right. So we're in the back parking lot. We're getting our stuff together. And I should note that our agency was very particular in the way you presented yourself. So they were more cared about process than they were about product. So if you looked good, but you screwed up, as long as you looked good screwing up, life was good. That's all that really mattered. So we made sure that our stuff was in order, our shoes were shined, our uniforms were ready to go, our bags were packed with all the right equipment. And, we were more worried about that in the moment, because we knew that we would be deployed up to the city, or thought we would be deployed up to the city, and wanted to make sure our stuff looked good. Car was clean, all that good stuff. So we got our act together. We walk into the building, and we walk into the lieutenant's office, and he says to us, what are you two doing here? What do you mean, what are we doing here? He goes, you guys are midnight guys. Like, it's now 9 o'clock in the morning. What are you doing here? And Bart's like, I don't know. Like, what are we, you guys watching the news? Like, what are we doing as an agency? And he goes, about what? And we're like, the whole world is coming to an end. We're like getting attacked from another country. We're at war, and New York City is like literally crumbling. He goes, yeah, not my city, not my problem. And Bart and I were like, holy crap, did that just happen? We looked at each other. We're like, all right. We walked out of his office, back out to the parking lot, threw everything we had that didn't say East Windsor Police on it, but said East Windsor PBA, because that's the union. And if we represent the union, we can do that on our own time anywhere. But we couldn't represent the agency if it wasn't an official assignment. So we quickly changed our shirts, and we covered up our badges, and we threw our stuff in the car and drove up the turnpike. And so we got off the turnpike in the Jersey City area, and there was a lot of checkpoints. So if I don't know how things have been in anything anybody else has been involved in, but this was almost like a foreign war scenario, where every intersection or every major area, there was a checkpoint you had to get through. So at that point, anybody with a badge, it could have come out of a cracker box. They were letting it through. And so we ended up getting to downtown Jersey City by the seaport area. And we parked the car, grabbed our bags, and we started walking towards the water's edge in Jersey City. And there was an FDNY fire department from New York's fireboat in Jersey City, right at the port there. And they're waving us on, like, come with us. So like, all right. So we hop on this boat, and as we start to go across, They're like, oh, you guys are cops, thank God. We just need more people. And nobody really knew what was going on yet. This was still very early in the process. But we got, so the distance between Jersey City and Manhattan is probably 1.5 miles to 2 miles across the water. It's 100% visible for those that haven't been there. And the smoke is coming up from downtown Manhattan. The smell was starting to come across the river. The sounds were starting to come across the river, which was an eerie silence, but yet so loud. It's very even difficult to describe. So it was slow motion going across, and the boat's probably moving 40 miles an hour across the Hudson. If anybody's been on the Hudson, it's not flat. It is a very rocky, wavy trip across from Jersey City to New York. But everything seems so quiet and still in the moment. And as we get across, it becomes very hazy and dark. So we're pulling into the harbor area in Lower Manhattan, right in the financial district. There's like a sailing club there, and the boats were kind of like tipped over in the water. Half the masts were broken. Like it literally looked like a war zone. Pull into the harbor. They kick us off the boat because they were going back to get another load of people from Jersey City. And all of a sudden we got like overwhelmed by the smell of things, the sight of things, and all of your senses started kicking in at the same time. And it got literally physically dark. And I'll show you pictures of that in a little bit. It was probably about 11 o'clock in the morning at that point. If you remember Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, it was a beautiful, sunny, still day. Probably about 65 degrees, 70 degrees, and probably one of the most beautiful days of the year. And as soon as we got off the boat into Lower Manhattan and around that first building of the financial district, it might as well have been 3 a.m. on a hazy night in the middle of the winter. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. The cloud of dust, smoke, concrete, everything. It was like walking into a time warp. It was very, very strange. And we weren't there on an official mission. We were a little bit on a rogue mission because our department wasn't sending us officially. So it became a bit of a challenge as to what we do next. Communication was an issue. Cell phones weren't working. For those that aren't familiar with Lower Manhattan, the cell phone towers were at the top of 2 World Trade and on the spire. So all of the communications for Lower Manhattan were disabled because of that. And they also had most of the telephone service ran out of the World Trade Center for most of Manhattan. So there was literally nothing you could do to talk to anybody. It was not only a problem for those coming into the city as support, it was a problem for FDNY, NYPD, any of the alphabet agencies for the feds. There was literally no communication. So what you lose there is command and control. You lose any type of incident command structure. For the law enforcement military folks on the call or listening, that is key. We're a top-down, bottom-up communication structure. And when the information doesn't flow up, the orders can't flow down. So there was no ability to talk or communicate. Everybody was on their own. There were small units that were assigned around that area that worked independently, but together, if that makes any sense. But there was no communication with a hierarchy. So anybody that's familiar with ICS, Incident Command Systems, or NIMS, which is National Information Management Systems, those processes didn't exist and couldn't exist because there was no communication, no command and control of the entire situation or scene, which is very difficult for somebody with a military law enforcement mindset to deal with, because that's how you're wired, that's how you're programmed, that's how you're trained. And we don't work in a world where it's every person for themselves. So that became an instant challenge. Once we kind of figured out the lay of the land, and we saw how laser focused everybody was in their individual mission, me and my partner was like, well, who do we know? Who can we go to? How are we most helpful? So the first thing that came to my mind was my experience in the medical examiner's office. And so we found them. I found Shia Rabowski, who ultimately became the head of operations for the medical examiner's office. He was like number 2 or number 3 in the whole command structure later on for the entire 9/11 investigative process. He is now a PhD, I believe, and author, and spoke a ton about his experiences over the years. But at that point, he was merely a physician's assistant with a couple years of experience at the medical examiner's office, dumped into this role. And boy, did he handle it unbelievably. So we connected with him. He was like, I don't know exactly what you can do. We're only a couple hours into this, but I know what you've done with me in the past. And I want you to go here. I have nobody else here. And just see what you find there. And it's close enough where you can run back and tell me what's going on. So he told us to go over to the atrium. So anybody that's familiar with Lower Manhattan, and if you're not, the atrium is a glass complex that's almost like, it's like a dome, but in layers. And it was between 2 buildings of the World Financial Center. And that had collapsed in and of itself. I'll show you pictures of that in a little bit as well. And he's like, just start digging, man. So me and my buddy Bart, we're in there digging away. This is the part that becomes a little bit more difficult to talk about. Some of it's fuzzy, some of it's hazy, some of it is incredibly emotional, but we were digging through all this debris. You're finding personal items, not necessarily related to people that may have been in the atrium, because everything was so scrambled. You know, anything that came out of the towers went for, you know, probably 20 to 30 blocks in every direction. It was kind of bizarre. So we started seeing personal items, and I have here in my notes, I put it in quotes, important papers, because at that point, are they really important? You know, we didn't have computers or the cloud like we do today. So you have, you know, bean counters and financial people and whatever else putting papers and files saying this is top secret, or this is the most important file folder in my office. So I need to make sure I keep this. In the end, really, who cares? And we'll go back to that later again, as far as perspective is concerned. But there's these top secret papers just strewn all over Manhattan, and nobody cares. Because why does it really matter at that point? So we're seeing stuff like that, clothing items, and then comes the human remains. That is probably the most difficult piece of it to rationalize. So I've been a cop then for, you know, almost 3 years. So I was a special part-time officer before that. Had worked in the medical examiner's office for years, an intern. I was an EMT for 10 years before that. Dead people don't bother me. It just doesn't affect me in a visual or an emotional way, because it becomes business at that point. But when we came across it in body parts, specifically in the atrium, that's where I felt emotions I didn't know I had. And I didn't really know what to do with them, to be quite honest with you. But you set that aside and you do your job and you keep moving forward, which I guess is at that point a good thing, because you need to be focused on the mission, as most people were. And we just started categorizing things. You know, garbage went over here, personal items went here, anything else looked important went here. If there were body parts, push them over here. Somebody's going to need those later. So we did what we could while we were there. We reported back to the medical examiner's office, letting them know what we did, what we found. Nothing of true evidentiary value, but this is how we kind of separated things out. And you don't really get very far over a course of a day or 2 days or 3 days when you're doing something like that. You realize like how insignificant a human really is in that moment, when you have this world above you that is just so massive, and things below you that you just can't sort through fast enough. But at some point, you hope what you did was helpful in the process. You know, everybody that moves something to the right place, and you hope it was helpful. So by the end of that day, one of the things that I had begun to think about was, holy cow, I've just been part of this. And so selfishly, in a certain way, and I have friends that worked in these buildings. I went to school in New York. I lived in New Jersey, just a few miles down the road. My life is centered around Metro New York. So the one person that immediately came to mind was my college roommate, David, who is like family to me and had been since we were 9 years old. And we had went to sleepaway camp together. We're friends all throughout school. We lived in a different town, and then we were college roommates for 3 out of the 4 years. And I'm like, man, I got to find this guy. So I called him, no answer. Obviously, the cell phones weren't really working. And it was not until really late that night or the next morning, again, time becomes kind of fuzzy, and I don't remember everything in finite detail, but it took, close to 24 hours to hear from him. And what I learned was he didn't know where he was, what he was doing. He was in, I think, like the 30-something floor of Tower 1. And he was able to get out prior to the collapses, but he was not far out by the time the collapse happened. So the chaos had already ensued. Took him time to get out of the city, find his way out of the city, get oriented. He had no phone with him. He had no wallet, which becomes a running joke later, because as spent a couple of days there digging through and sifting through stuff, and communication started to open up. He would text me, "Yo, bro, you found my wallet yet?" So to this day, I actually was texting with him this morning, and I was like, man, I almost feel bad giving this talk today, because 20 years later and I still haven't found your wallet. Like, I feel like I failed. So it's some of the humor that kind of keeps these things from falling into a super dark place, but it's also important to share some of these experiences, even if they're not your own, with people that have had similar and like experiences. And I think that goes for so many of us that have been through various different things. So going back to the experience there, we had spent a couple of days, working as much as we could to get through as much as we can. The command structure hadn't really started to form yet. It was still kind of a free-for-all. But I had to go back to work, my real job. And it became this weird thing. Like, I became so laser focused, my partner was so laser focused, that we felt like we were on this, and I'm not really a religious guy, but like a mission from God, like that we had to be there. It just seemed so important. And going back to patrol the streets of East Windsor and write a speeding ticket or a traffic light ticket, or your brake lights, or like, it just seemed really like, what have we been doing? You really kind of realize what's important, and you start putting things in perspective, whether it's the top secret papers, or whether it's the job you're doing back at home, or, what have I done for my life? Like, these people were pushing papers and all of a sudden they're killed by terrorists. Like the whole dichotomy of all these different things is just so crazy. What did these people ever do to deserve any of this? Which, and obviously we all know is nothing. So we went back to work. We were there for those 3 days. Bart and I were kind of in a fog. We didn't really talk about it at all, other than with each other a little bit. We were pretty quiet at work those 3 days. It became a way for us to process, but it also became problematic because we weren't engaged to the people to the left and the right of us, which depend on you and we depend on them. And that was the first time I ever felt like disengaged from life, like life was a movie. It was just so strange to feel that way. And as I said before, as time goes by, some of these details do get fuzzy, and it's hard to put yourself back in those moments. But after those 3 days were over, I had gone back periodically over the next couple of weeks on days off, just to kind of see what was going on and seeing if there's anything I could do. I just had that feeling like I didn't do enough. And I'm still left with that today. And which is a theme for a big part of my life. I always feel in those moments of crisis like that, I can't do enough. And after a couple of times of having gone back, the command structure was really built up pretty well as far as like ICS or NIMS is concerned. The FBI had taken over after about 5 days. Things started to resemble what a small scene incident command structure looked like. They had a command center set up. They had direct lines of communication. They had specific assignments all trickling down through a hierarchy of a command structure. So as I went back a few more times, I felt left out in a way because I was no longer there on not that I ever was, but I was no longer there on an official mission because I wasn't sponsored by my agency and my agency wasn't involved with the mutual aid contingency. So it was like standing on the outside looking in, and that feeling of hopelessness and helplessness of wanting to do more, but being held back from doing it it was very strange, not something that I'd ever experienced before in my life, and still something that I find moments now and that I reflect back on those emotions, but it was strange. So I ended up never going back after those couple of times, but it always burned me that I hadn't. So somewhere around early November of 2001, I was at work. I got a call from my lieutenant. Hey, can you stop in the office for a minute? It's like, all right. And the guy wasn't really all that friendly to begin with. So it was weird that he wanted to talk about something. It's usually is never good. So I go sit down in his office. He's like, hey, listen, he hands me this envelope. He goes, I hate doing this to you, but this is an internal affairs investigation for you going against orders and policy violations back on September 11th and the following days. You're being written up, for insubordination. So I'm like, holy crap, this is ridiculous. So I'm dealing with this internal affairs investigation for a not my city, not my problem, I was told. But now all of a sudden it's my problem. So it was kind of crazy. And in the end of that, after some plea negotiations, I ended up with a permanent letter in my file, but I didn't get the 3 suspension days they were looking for. So whatever that's worth, it is what it is. They could have given me 100 suspension days at that point. It didn't matter. But it gave me perspective on them, what their priorities were, covering their own backs, for whatever reason. And it's discussions we've all had before, in this forum. But when I was sitting down to write out my notes and thinking back on that, I'm like, wow, how just juvenile is that? And, it was crazy. But so I was dealing with that. And then it really put a sour taste in my mouth, not about what we had done or decided to do, but about the perspective of 9/11 itself. And, I always go back to the feeling of 9/12 when everybody was in this unified format, and this whole idea that we were one nation under God and indivisible, and everybody was red, white, and blue. And it didn't take long, even in my own agency, to go beyond that and realize that that's not true. So I got that wonderful feeling that we are really a unified, good people. And then you have, you get written up for doing what I consider to be a good thing. So it put a sour taste in my mouth. I put it all in a box in the back of my head. I never really thought about going back again because it just didn't seem right. And then fast forward to 2002, I met Stephanie in June of 2002, started having, an adult life. My mom got sick and passed away in 2003. And I ended up taking care of my grandmother for the next, 9 years of her life. So the idea of going back and enlisting in the military, like so many people did after 9/11, and giving back in a way, or serving in a way that was so much greater than what I was doing at that time. And to get that sense of purpose and completion, it just became less practical, and certainly less responsible. And I didn't do it, and I have no regrets by my decision. However, I'm so grateful for those that did. I'm so grateful for those that stayed around the pile and spent years there with the investigation. So amazingly grateful for those that answered the call in so many different ways, especially those that, you know, put on the uniform of the American flag and went overseas to kick ass and you know, do what they needed to do to take revenge on what happened here. So for those of you that are here that have done that, awesome, thank you. And I'm forever grateful for something that I was never able or willing to sacrifice to be able to do what you guys did. So that's amazing, and I can't thank you enough for that. So as time passed and there were people doing these other parts of the global mission following 9/11, I never stopped to deal with my own emotions about how I felt about that. And I never went back to the site at the World Trade Center. I never really talked about my experiences for many years until social media really became a thing and part of my life, which was a little bit later in the process, as Stephanie will probably attest to. I was 100% against it for a very long time, and then collapsed into the whole social media chaos. But which is awesome, because that's how I met all you guys, through LinkedIn. So glad I took that leap. But I never really spoke about the whole 9/11 thing until social media became a thing. And I started posting the pictures every September 11th that I had stuck back in a file somewhere. And a quick side note on that, dating myself, we had no cell phone cameras back then, which my kids find hard to believe. And you're lucky if you had a cell phone at all. I was proud to have a StarTAC Motorola flip phone, which was awesome at the time. But the only thing I had with me was a box camera that had, you know, 24 exposures on it that I probably had left over from the wedding I was at before. And that's all I had with me. So I had those pictures developed. Many of them did not come out well. I do have some that I definitely want to share with you guys today. But those pictures I reflect back on now every year around September 11th, and proud to share them with people, because I think we're starting to forget what September 12th was like. And I think it's important that we get back to that space. You know, sadly, it takes tragedy to be able to get there, which we've seen in the last few weeks with the Afghanistan departure conversations and tragedies. And we've also seen here recently in New Jersey with some of the weather we've had recently. But I get a level of solace of sharing these pictures. So you'll have to bear with me while I do that in a few minutes. So my terminal leave from my job prior to my retirement, for those that don't know what that is, you have burn off time that you have left prior to retirement. You can take it, at least here in New Jersey. And that started for me somewhere in September of 2019, coincided with a shoulder surgery. So thank you to East Windsor Police Department for giving me vacation for that. And so I started that in September. Come early November, Stephanie had a work meeting that was in Lower Manhattan. And she was like, well, why don't you go with me and you can go to the memorial? It was like around the corner across the street from the memorial. I was like, I don't know. I haven't been back there in years. It's just not for me. I've always wanted to go. I've always wanted to see it. I just couldn't do it. And I don't remember what she said or what she did that made that argument convincing, but we went together that day. She went to her meeting. I went to the memorial. I was one of the only people there. It was an early morning of a weekday. So it was not the tourist lines of a Saturday morning in New York City, which worked out really well for me. And I remember walking through the door, I was shaking, my knees were weak, I was sick to my stomach. All I wanted to do was throw up. And the people in that building are so fantastic that they recognize the emotions that people are showing And they also recognize the emotions that people aren't showing, which I find to be even more miraculous. And I was greeted with open arms by these two old ladies, and they couldn't have been more gracious. And they asked me why I was there. They asked me what I knew about 9/11. They asked me if I had any experiences, where I was from, what I was doing that day. So that was the first time I really spoke about it in length out loud. And I'll never forget that moment. I broke down crying, which is in moments not too far from right now, actually. But it was an incredible, overwhelming experience that I am so happy I had, but also so happy I waited for, because it just felt like the time was right, and I needed to move forward with it. And I appreciated having been there. So when I was walking through the museum, it was almost surreal to me, similar to, and I'll just put a small caveat here, my family is Holocaust survivors. We're German Jews by descent, and they've taken me to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. While I know that's my family history, you walk through that and it's surreal. It's emotional, and it's a learning experience, and you know these stories, and you're connected to them. However, it's history, and it just seems like history. As I was walking into and through the 9/11 memorial, it was my history, and it became very different. So they're walking me through this one really sweet woman. Gosh, I wish I retained her contact information. I don't know if she ever gave it to me, but she literally held my hand and had her arm around my shoulder for most of my walk through it. And it was unbelievable to look back on what was, and to relive and be back in that moment. And it was standard emotions until I walked around the corner on the bottom floor, and there was a fire truck in the middle of the floor. That's one of their exhibits. And if you haven't been there before, I'll try not to spoil it too much, but if you have been there before, you come around that corner and it's just in your face, and it's so vast, and it just takes your breath away. And I recognized that, and I expected that, but I literally crumbled to my knees, probably the first time in my life. And I couldn't figure out what was different about that moment. So as I'm sobbing and I'm standing there and literally sick to my stomach, and this guy comes over to help this nice lady out that was with me and stands me back up, and he goes, "What's different?" He realized that something was different. He goes, "What's different about this exhibit?" I said, "I don't know. I just don't know." So we talked for a little bit. I introduced myself to him. And then I was like, I have some pictures that I'd like to share with you. So we're going through some of my pictures on my phone, and we both paused all of a sudden. And we realized one of my pictures is of that fire truck. And hadn't made the connection, and we're like, holy crap, that's why this is so incredibly emotional. And he's like, "I want you to show that picture to our curator." So we walked over to the curator, and the curator's frozen in time. I'm like, oh my God, what just happened? It was just this weird relationships of people. So as it would turn out, they didn't have any pictures of that fire truck at the scene. That fire truck was recovered from the Staten Island dumps, where all of the evidence and everything was stored. I mean, hundreds of thousands, millions of pieces of evidence, probably 1,500 different vehicles. They picked that fire truck out of a heap of vehicles to pick it up and put it in the museum. The curator told me that there's no other connection to that fire truck other than that's the one that was easiest to get from where it was and the easiest to get into the museum. But when they did research after it was there, they had no documentation of that fire truck ever at the 9/11 site on 9/11. And I have the only picture that they ever knew that existed of that fire truck. So I was able to share that with them. Last I heard, it's a permanent part of their archives, which is kind of where dealing with this, which is the final piece of my story, is that it closed the loop, it closed the circle of a feeling that I had the days and weeks and months following my experience there, that I couldn't do enough. I didn't have a final purpose. I wasn't able to contribute something that was meaningful to anyone or any specific mission. And that's partly by the nature of how and why I was there, and partly by the nature of why I shouldn't have been there in the first place, at least according to my agency. But 18 and a half years later, 18 years later, I was able to close that loop and find the purpose of why I was there. I had the only picture of the truck they chose for the museum. And to make that, to broaden that thought, I think from the conversations that we all have together on a regular basis, the forum that Sara hosts and provides, and the guidance she gives so many different people, I think it's important to realize when you're struggling and when you have these moments of lack of purpose, or finding out the question to why, just know that it's somewhere down the road and you just haven't seen it yet. You haven't heard it yet, and you're not in a position to be able to appreciate it yet. And I think so many people give up way too soon. And I know for sure that I am one of those people that gives up way too soon. But those moments are something that I reflect on, to know that the why may be coming later. You just don't know when, you don't know how, and you don't know what your purpose is going to be. But know that at some point it will show and you'll be able to close that loop. And that's kind of the lessons I've taken away from all of this. And I hope that it's a lesson that we can all share to those that are struggling, or that have times where, someone needs the support. And, we'll never know the why in the moment, but hopefully that purpose, we'll find it later. So that's, if you can continue to share that with those that need the support, I think that's the best thing we can do for each other. So to this day, I still get extremely emotional internally and sometimes externally about talking about 9/11. I still get angry. I still feel the hate. And regardless of what people ask you to do, I will never find the forgiveness. It's just not in my heart to do so. And I am incredibly grateful, eternally grateful, for those that answered the call that day, not just because it's part of my story, but because it's part of humanity. And people stepped up in a way that they didn't know they had the strength to. And I think it's important for everybody to remember what they are capable of in the moment of crisis, and to never think that you can't do that, whatever that is. So know that you are strong enough if that moment calls you. And I'm just so grateful for the stories of all those people that I've come across that were there that day and beyond. Grateful for the stories and the experiences and the heroics of those that served the cause overseas on our behalf. And I reflect on and remember almost daily those that still suffer physical injuries and are still getting sick from their days on the pile following September 11th, 2001. I mentioned earlier, I was just on the phone with my roommate that still looking for his wallet. His next door neighbor, where he lives now in Florida, is a retired NYPD officer who in the last 6 months was diagnosed with lung cancer, and AKA 9/11 illness. So his lung cancer is specifically related to 9/11. He spent 2.5 years at the site, and then time also at the Staten Island depot. So people are still getting sick, people are still dying, and it's we got to remember that when we talk about this. My individual story, while it is my story and I'm proud of it, is a blip on the radar compared to what people are still dealing with today. and have been dealing with for the last 20 years, and will continue to deal with for the next, many years. And I'm just grateful to be just a small part of it. So as we head into the conversation piece of this, I just want to take a minute to share my pictures that I had, and hopefully we'll put some of what I was talking about into context. And I'm open to any questions that you guys have. Again, just please remember, these are from a disposable camera 20 years ago, and the camera itself is probably 10 years old. But they're definitely fun to watch and to look at. And if Sarah, you can give me the share screen option.
Yep, it should be on.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
I'll go back to my non-technologically advanced skills here. All right. Can you guys see them?
Yeah, we got it, David.
Awesome. Now I got to figure out how to advance them. Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. So the first one, that's just me right after we had gotten there. As you can see, this is about 11 o'clock in the morning on a beautiful Tuesday. It's looks like 3 in the morning in the middle of an Arizona dust storm. This is the base of the pile where towers, this was, I believe, Tower 2, if I remember correctly. So you can see a lot of these folks are construction folks that were working in the area. You'll see a couple fire helmets. Most of them don't say FDNY on it. These are all volunteers. This is on the pile itself. They had brought in some equipment early on. Again, there was a big building being built right around the corner from the World Trade Center as part of the financial district. So a lot of this equipment was readily available from that work site.
David, some of this is after the days after, right?
Again, some of that's fuzzy, but
yeah, because I can remember the metal still being like glowing when I got there the night of.
There,
like,
yeah. So
heat,
yeah, there were definitely,
fire.
absolutely. There was. I don't think I have pictures of that. This is
remember
low
it though, right?
What's that?
You remember it though, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it was yesterday. The metal was literally like a filament in a light bulb, just glowing out of the ground.
And that was higher up on the pile,
Yeah.
which I don't have pictures of. So this is my partner Bart. We were a couple years younger then. So this is the following day, I believe. So this, if you look at that structure there, that was kind of what the atrium looked like. That actually may be the backside of the atrium. I don't really remember.
It is. It's the backside. It's the backside of the atrium. You're right.
Yeah, so there were two glass structures there.
Yeah.
So this is the following day when people started. They were landing military folks at the higher end of Manhattan and bringing them down on the west side. So that's the fire truck that I was talking about.
That's the truck.
That's the truck.
I know that truck. It was Burger King's right around the corner, David.
Yep, absolutely.
That's where I came in through. I came in through Burger King. And when I went to the museum, I saw that truck. I had the same experience you did. I was like, that's the truck. I know that truck.
Yep. What I also, as a complete side note, when you look back, some of these pictures are 20 years ago. And for those of us that have been in law enforcement or in the fire department, you look back at these vehicles and it's like a time warp. Our vehicles change over so quickly that you look back on some of the stuff, you're like, wow, that was the crappiest equipment ever. But then you realize, that this 20 years ago, and that equipment's probably 5 or 10 years old at the time. So this, if you remember the footbridge that went between the financial district side and One World Trade, that's what that is there, that red footbridge. So this is one that always got me, was the collapsed rescue truck. I remember that day when we were sitting there walking past, or standing there walking past it, and there was no equipment left. And the collapsed rescue truck was part of Rescue One's company. This is Rescue Three's, but they, an elite group of FDNY folks that this was all they did was collapse rescue, and they all died that day. So this is all that's left of that company. They were one of the first ones into that building, and because that was stationed in Lower Manhattan, and they all died that day, all those firefighters. So this is the atrium. The glass side that we're looking at is on the back side of that. This is the stuff that we started, sorting through. If you look at in the middle of the atrium, you'll see those steel I-beams. Those are actually from Tower 1 or Tower 2, which was several blocks away. So that's how far the material spread, and whatever was under that obviously is catastrophic loss as well. So this is that morning when we went across. You can see pictures of the backside of the atrium in the distance. But what sticks with me today is the smells and the tastes. The sounds, not as much, but it's the smells and the tastes. And I reflect on them often. And we'll be walking around or doing something wherever we are as a family, and I'll address that I smell something or taste something and reflect it back from my experiences there. So those are my pictures. I'll stop that. And hopefully that puts some of what I was talking about into context. It's not the stuff we generally see on the news or in other media formats. So hopefully it gives you a different perspective and a different experience of what it was like to be there in the moment. I am pretty much out of thoughts. If anybody would like to ask questions, there's nothing I won't try to answer, nothing I'm offended to hear, nothing that makes me uncomfortable. I'll do my best to answer any questions you may have. And I know John probably has a perspective that he would share too if I don't have it. So ask away.
Thank you, David. That was so powerful. Thank you for sharing. Do you want to share, Johnny?
I just want to, the number one, David, thank you. And I'll be as quick as possible because unfortunately my story is going to be on that movie and I don't want to do a spoiler alert and Mike get mad at me. But David and I spoke. He knew we have very similar stories, a little bit different. I was in the Marine Corps. I didn't follow orders. I went MIA. The Marine Corps made me come out. They wouldn't let me stay there. Similar to East Windsor not letting him stay there. A lot of similar, but one of the things that I think that I would be remiss is the scale of destruction of that day. Like there is no picture, there is no movie. If you've never been to New York City, to the original World Trade Center, I literally keep a picture of it right here next to me. These buildings were massive. And when they collapsed, I watched them collapse with my own eyes. It literally just engulfed all of downtown Manhattan, which is the largest. It makes LA, all you West Coast people that think LA is big, it's small compared to New York City. And it just covered New York City. And the scale of destruction, the scale of the smell and the taste is exactly what I had my triggers, David, and before I did the TRP, that's exactly what they asked me what my triggers were. And it was smell and taste. And ironically enough, for me, it's always pork. I love pork roast, and this may sound gruesome, and I don't mean to disrespect anybody lost any loved ones in 9/11, but pork, when it's cooked, especially on a propane grill, not necessarily a charcoal, for some reason, when it was cooked on a propane grill, the smell was very similar. And for years, until they did this therapy a few months ago, literally 19 years of my life, I would just be driving and smell somebody cooking pork, and I would just be right back in it, because it would smell like the combination of the metal burning and the human flesh burning, and that's what we were smelling when we were there, was, and then like this slight tint of jet fuel. And I guess the propane kind of just the mix of the two. And there's moments that and since the therapy, I tried it out. I bought some pork and I grilled it and I was fine. So I hope the therapy on Sunday helps out, David. I really do. Once you do that, once we go to Virginia together, dude, we just me and you, we'll go to the memorial together. Just you and me, nobody else. And I'm tearing up just saying. I went through the therapy and I'm still tearing up. More power to you, brother. And thank you for, doing the same thing I did, disobeying orders and showing up. That's what an American does, right? We disobey the king. That's how we became this country. And thank you for sharing your story, David. And I always got your six, brother.
Thank you for your friendship and support. Always, I got yours. You know that.
Yeah.
Hey, David, my name's Shannon Hanks. I grew up in Oklahoma, and I joined up on my 17th birthday into the National Guard. My dad was a Vietnam Marine. So, Johnny, I feel you, brother. My grandpa was a medic during the Korean War and the German War. But, you talk about the smells, the taste. I got activated for the Oklahoma City bombing in '95. And guys, I relate to exactly what you're saying. Fast forward, I went active duty after we done the Oklahoma City bombing. Went to Iraq in '03, Afghanistan in '06, back to Iraq in '08. And guys, I'm glad to hear that the therapy working for you, Johnny. I actually went back to school after I retired from the Army to become a marriage and family therapist. Just because in the state of Oklahoma, there's 4 male veteran therapists in the entire state.
Whoa.
But guys, thank you for what you've done. My oldest son is a firefighter. My second son and his wife are both police officers. My wife is a nurse. So guys, when I say, man, David and Johnny, when I hear y'all talking, man, I got goosebumps, man. I can still feel it. I can still taste it. And it's been, since '95.
The TRP, if you need me to get you in touch with them, there's a group called 220. They'll do it completely free for you. Veterans, law enforcement, and first responders, and your family. His name's Dan Jarvis. I'll try to find you on LinkedIn. What is it, Shannon? Are you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, Shannon Hanks. I'm now a VA benefits advisor here on Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So it's kind of funny. I joined the Army to get out of Oklahoma, and I spent 15 years stationed at Fort Sill.
Shannon, first,
New York City is the same way. It's like a magnet. Jersey and New York City, you can't escape it once you're here.
Yeah, like I said, with my oldest son being a fighter, and my second son and his wife are both police officers, and I got 7 kids and 12 grandkids, and it's just
that's amazing.
It is, guys. Thank you for your story, man. That was so dang powerful. I'm looking forward to the healing that's going to happen in your life, David. I'm thankful that like I said, thankful for both of you for, not only what you're doing, but guys, it takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of courage to come out here and be vulnerable and talk about that. So, man, thank you all for that.
And thank you, Shannon, for your service and your family's continued commitment to making your world, our world, your community better place than when you left it, when you got there. Sorry. I will say, on a bit of a comedic note, New Jersey feels like Oklahoma in the past few weeks. For those of you that have been watching the news, the tornadoes here are unfreaking believable. We talked about last night, we have a friend that completely lost everything last night, yesterday, 2 days ago, losing track of time in the tornado. So you can keep your Oklahoma. We don't want it here. It's absolutely crazy. I don't know how you guys deal with that stuff on a regular basis, but thank you for all that you do for your family does. And thank you for being part of today.
Well, David, we didn't really have a choice, being in Oklahoma, you got Kansas above us and Texas below us, and, Kansas blows and Texas sucks, and we're stuck in the middle.
That's fantastic.
Shannon, thank you for your service. And hopefully, you know, you got some payback for what me and David had to go through.
Man, I tell you, my neck got broke on my last deployment to Iraq, so they medically retired me 6 years ago. And I got a service dog that gets to go to work with me every day, you know,
Yeah.
and it's just helping those that, you know, those with whom we served. And matter of fact, I also teach a group called Reboot Combat Recovery. They've also got one for first responders. So this week was week 1 of our reboot course. And I've been teaching that for, man, almost 6 years now.
That's
But,
good stuff.
you know, guys, once again, thank you for what you do. Sara, you sent me emails every week for, I feel, about 3 months. And this has literally been the first time I've got to come on, and I'm so thankful that I did, man. Guys, anyway, that's enough about me. This is about y'all today. And once again, I hope that you and your families are prospering, and that you're able to live life to the fullest.
Well,
Just
out of
remember,
the support of my family and specifically my wife who's here with us today. So we definitely do. And, you know, whatever support we can provide you with what you're doing in your teachings, you know, please let me know. And I'd be happy to contribute whatever I can is in whatever you find appropriate. So definitely.
Just remember,
Yeah,
man.
likewise. I'll definitely get you in touch with 22-0. Yeah.
Well, just remember, brother, way of the warrior has no chance against way of the wife.
100% correct.
Can I jump in, Sara? I have to go at 12:15, but I just want to say to all 3 of you, and the 3 of you are in the center of my screen right now, it really takes someone special to run towards trouble, right? Run towards, you know, you talk about that when you see people running away, and you 3 run towards, and that's a whole different human being. So thank you, all of you who serve, all of you who are police officers, veterans, active duty. It's just, you're like 1%, maybe not even 1%. So thank you so much for being who you are. And then also, not only that you did that, but all of you, the ones I know on this call, are paying it back now, right? You're all doing something to help others who are maybe have gone through the same things you have the same struggles. So that's just like a whole different, you're superhumans to me. So thank you so much. And it's like, it just warms my heart to know that, you know, there's so much bad in the world. To know that people out there like you exist makes me feel a lot safer.
Thank you.
Give me too much credit, Vaughn.
No, I don't, John. You don't give yourself enough credit.
I just do what a Marine does.
I was tired of milking cows.
David, I gotta say, man, the strength that you showed today, man, and sharing that story is very powerful, as you can see from some of the emotions of people's faces on here. For me, that time frame is still somewhat of a black space for me of processing all that. So I'm so happy that you're able to share that, and it's able to have such a profound impact on people. Yeah, it's harrowing. And Sara and Shannon, just the credit to this call is the power of our story. Look at the power that this has had, and the impact that this has had on so many individuals. All the people on this call, you use the word vulnerability, and it does take a tremendous amount of strength for all the folks that you see on this call to be so vulnerable and to share. And I think that that's part of the reason we're able to heal, is not just because we're able to have that courage and vulnerability, but because this is one lane, one small lane, and you're doing so much more, Shannon, that you're able to have this next mission forward of selflessness. And to Vaughn's point, it seems that so many people are able to do that stuff because they're the selfless, mission focused folks that run to rather than away. That's their entire purpose in life. Religious or not, that's what somebody has put you on this planet to do, is to take care of other people, right? And that happens in so many different venues. And I applaud you. I admire you for all those different things that you're doing and taking on all those extra challenges. And please, I hope that you continue joining us on these things, because I can't wait to hear more of your stories. And as David's done here and so many times in other venues, you're saving lives with your stories, man. And I bow to you.
So I'd like to just say how proud I am of you, David. My David, I should say. And, you know, it's hard to even put into words. You know, there's so much that you've done in your life, both publicly and for and with and as part of our family, but you can't separate them. They're all together. It's in the values and the ideals that, you know, you live and that you share with our 3 children. And, you know, I think that as humans, we have to realize for all of us that, you know, we are our collected experiences, and it's what we do with them that allows us to live the power of our story. And if we think about it, there are ways in which our biggest strengths are amazing, right? When you think about running towards the challenges, running towards the trauma, running to help each other, running to back each other up. Oh, hi, little one. So distracted by children I am. But I think that like the fact that there's our biggest strengths also can become our biggest weaknesses. And they become our biggest weaknesses when we aren't aware of where the challenges then ensue from the strengths. And I share that because I think that most of the people on this call, look, I'm in business, I'm in marketing. I don't run towards things. I solve for problems, but I sit at a desk, right? But the reason why I'm sharing that perspective is that most people on this call that have been in lines of emergency services related work, military work, etc. You know, you guys are all programmed and essentially paid to and supported to be strong and have it together and carry that weight, carry that bag. And I think it's important for you all to know that you are human too, and you have emotions and you are real people. And not only do your loved ones see you, and it's nice that we're not wearing uniforms today, right? Like, 'cause the uniform can mask us as human beings. And, you know, you are all human. So as much as you're all strong enough to run towards the problem, be strong enough to run towards your own problems and confront your own problems head on, just as you would confront the problems of the world and the problems of others. And I think that is really hard to do because you're supposed to be the strong one. And I know you carry that weight. And David, you said this earlier in your talk that you never feel like you're doing enough, but that's your biggest strength. But it can become a weakness if we don't pay attention to that. And I'm so grateful for this whole group on so many levels. David can attest to the fact that, like, and I'm not such a religious person, but I am religious about his 9 o'clock call on Thursday nights because he needs to be on with all of you. And I love y'all for it. I just said y'all, and I'm from New York, by the way. So I just have to also say that too. But in all seriousness, I really love all of you. I don't know you all, but I love you. I really do. And I'm so grateful for the fact that David's continued to open up more and more, because I know he's on his journey, but I think he's becoming stronger. And I believe in him. And I know he's committed to wanting what he wants. And it's all about having support along the journey. So I would just say that I think there's also, and Sara, I'd welcome the conversation. I'm sorry I'm going on for so long here, but I'd welcome the conversation that it might be interesting to do a power of our story for spouses and partners of people that are in these service roles that you all share, because I don't really feel like there's been a great support network for spouses of, you know, active duty, law enforcement, military. And I don't know if the military does that better than law enforcement, but especially hearing that, so some of the stories that David shared about how dysfunctional his agency was, there surely wasn't a spouse network from that together. So I think that could be a really interesting thing, Sara, and welcome talking about it. And the last thing I'd also share is that while I wasn't there that day, I worked in the World Trade Center as an intern in the summer of 2000 on the 27th floor of Tower 2. And oddly, as an intern, I had a window cube, which just happened to be the desk that was available at the time. And so I spent the whole summer, I'm from New York, so I know it, but spent the whole summer down there. I still have my World Trade Center ID. I have the bathroom key. I have the shared experiences, lived experiences. And for me, when I walked through that museum, which I remember at the time, David was kind of annoyed that I went to the museum way before he did. I actually went before it opened because I work in marketing, and Edelman did the work for public relations pro bono for World Trade Center, for which I was an Edelman client. And I went with a team of people and lived that experience together with a group of teammates. For me, seeing the window on display in the museum was pretty powerful. And I think it just teaches us that the context of what triggers us to the memories of what are important and what we've experienced are all shared and collected. And one of which, if we can relate to through our personal stories, it's what humanizes us all. And it's what creates then bonding. So I'll just stop there and say thank you again. And I just appreciate that we can all get together and discuss what is really most important in life.
Stephanie, it's so good to have you on. I'm so glad that you were here today.
Stephanie,
to hop on this, just really quickly, I just want to say really quickly, Tom Satterley, a Delta Force, retired Delta Force, his wife is coming on October 8th to share what it is like to be the wife of somebody recovering and healing from somebody as intense as Delta Force. So please come on. I think it's going to be powerful. She's written a book. They are very, very vulnerable. So thank you for bringing that up. And again, it's wonderful to have you.
Stephanie, 220 will do the therapy for you. They did it for my wife too. They did it for me and my wife. David, I just tell them, trust me, it's a half hour. You'll be blown away at what it will do. And David, just ask them to do it for Stephanie at the TRP. I can't swear by it enough. And you want to know something really crazy? His best friend is my sister's best friend's brother. And we met each other through
Good math on that.
So your sister,
Abby Stoltz is my sister's best friend.
that's crazy.
Yeah, isn't that nuts? But call 220.
Oh, that's why you went to Heightstown. That's why you went to Old Heights. Okay, yeah.
My sister is Susan Kasiba.
That's crazy.
Yeah, small world. But David, have 220. Stephanie, if my wife wasn't working, she'd come down and tell you. It's amazing. And she went through it too, and it's helped her a great deal. And they'll do it for spouses as well, completely free. I wanted to make sure I said that before. I'll shut up now. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that resource was there for you for free. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Papa Ron, you have something to say.
Yeah. I was going to say how impressed I was with you, David, that you were telling the story with Stephanie there. And I'm even more impressed that Stephanie spoke up and gave her perspective as well. With the San Diego Veterans Coalition, I'm co-champion of the Family Life Action Group. And when we started this in really 2014, when I started taking over there, spouses were not even part of the conversation. It was those military and first responder heroes, and the family was really, it wasn't even part of it existed, but it wasn't the conversation. And so we really coined the phrase then, spouses and families transition too. And I didn't go through anything that my wife didn't go through something because of that, and so as we forget that, and your story is right. And so we, at the coalition, we have, we're working around spouse employment. There's spouse unemployment in San Diego County is about 4 times the general population for spouses of veterans. And even more so if they're caregivers, and I don't like to call spouses caregivers. if they're spouses that care for their person. And but I'm just really impressed, Stephanie, that you spoke up there, and I appreciate that. And that perspective adds a more completeness to the stories, because when you're engaged in something directly, you can't see everything. But when you're not engaged but impacted by it, sometimes I believe the spouses have a broader perspective and view than even the military member or first responder that's engaged. So I just was very impressed. And I'm not easily impressed, but I was impressed. So thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, David. And
Thank
then
you.
my final comment is that though it is important to do things right, that is almost, it's doing the right things right is probably the greater call. And so being able to do things right and do the right things is probably the greater call. And so many people have sacrificed their positions and status to do the right things right. And so I appreciate that, David. So that'll be it for me.
Thank you. You're always an inspiration, my friend. Thank you for that.
Quickly, Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing that. I've said this many times that I actually believe as much as the first responders and military folks sacrifice, it's not us who sacrifice, it's actually the family members, and which will kind of lead into my question here. That day was horrific for our entire country, and particularly ones like you, David, who ran there. But in your story, the biggest tragedy that I find of this, and you kind of glassed over it a little bit, was the betrayal by your department, and how that process worked. And I just like to, somebody who's kind of felt that betrayal stuff when you're trying to do the right thing, how you process that, and probably even more importantly, Stephanie, how did you process it? Because it was probably somewhat different. I know from my personal experience, and David knows a little bit about it, is that as betrayed as I may feel about it, my wife feels probably 1,000 times more betrayed by my organization than I do, because she looks at me as something a little bit more than I frankly think of myself, and to give the selflessness that we do, and then to be betrayed. How did you guys deal with that as a family and reconcile that, if you ever even did?
I'd be as, and that's a great question. And knowing everything that you have gone through and are continuing to go through, I can certainly relate to that from my own experience on my own level. I don't know that I ever really reconciled that. I don't know that I ever will. It wasn't the only time I felt betrayed by my agency. Our agency was, I don't want to say unique, but it was, its focuses were based on perception that goes along with shine shoes for a midnight shift. Like it's seriously. And, and I get the whole concept of, you perform the way you appear, and there's a whole idea of command presence, and like, I get that. But if I'm really walking through the apartments, do these scumbags really care if my shoes are shined? Is that really going to stop them from committing a crime? Come on, so these rules were set by people that, spent minimal time doing the work, and they spent most of their time trying to get promoted or working to get promoted. And, I put it in air quotes, but the leaders of our agency do anything but, and are anything but. And their whole goal was to make rules for thee, but not for me, and they set unreasonable expectations. And if you weren't focusing your career on being one of the quote unquote leaders, they just shit on you every chance they could get to make sure you didn't get to that position based on your hard work. So there's a very big difference, and I'm sure many agencies and many federal government agencies are very similar, but those that do, can, and will, those that can't will study to become leaders. And those that truly are leaders don't need to study to do it. And those that are truly leaders don't need a rank or a title to be one. And it took me some time to get there. And I don't consider myself a leader. I think that I've done things where leadership qualities certainly came through. I think there's people that I find that I try to emulate their leadership to put forth my own. But I don't know that I ever reconciled the betrayal. And I don't know that you can. I think if you can, you're a greater person than I, man. And I like I said about the whole 9/11 thing, I don't have the heart to forgive in that context. And I think that's a struggle that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. And I think that goes back to the betrayal. We as a country were betrayed by others, by ill actors. And in the course of betrayal, I can't forgive. And that goes back to something we've talked about in the past about my buddy Danny's suicide, last year, that his suicide was based on betrayal. It was betrayal by his agency, by his community that he served, and by his wife. And I can't forgive any one of those factors regarding his suicide. And I feel the same way about the ways that I feel been betrayed, and it includes, things that have taken place in the agency. But Stephanie, if you want to answer that as well.
Yeah, gosh, it's a really multi-layered question. And I think it's a really healthy one that we talk about. Can you not hear me?
No, we're just saying goodbye to John.
Oh, okay. Bye.
I was just saying, David, got your six always. And Stephanie, thank you for looking out for this jughead.
Yeah, and I'll look out for you guys too if you need me. Bye.
Give him a punch on the shoulder for me after, will you?
I will.
All right. Bye,
I'll,
guys.
I'll make sure I choose the shoulder that didn't have the surgery though, okay?
All right. So I was going to say somewhere else, but I wanted to be polite. So have a good weekend, guys.
Yeah, buddy.
All right. Good weekend. So I guess for me, well, two main things I want to talk about. First is I think that in the course of the 20-year career that he was there, for which I was a part of it for 18 of them, I think I got to acceptance for what it was, and David has never gotten to that acceptance. So, and it's not that I got cynical about it. I just accepted the fact that it was like living in high school with high school rules of people that, I guess you know what I mean by that, where it's just like, come on, like you're not going to get promoted if you didn't paint like the person's house from the person above you and like all that like nonsense, like, and that's real. I'm not making that up. So it's not just about shoe shining. It was just like a acceptance that the place was messed up. And David never moved to that point of acceptance through my eyes, at least, he can speak for, so there's the head nod. And so it's hard to feel like, to me, the word betrayal is not accurate, because you can't be betrayed by somebody that you've already accepted you can't trust, and you've already accepted the fact that they're not who you want them to be. And I think that there's things like in my life, and David and I are different communicators. I'm more of a think out loud kind of communicator. And I'm also high, like extroverted. If you ever take one of those scales, I'm like off the charts E, and he's more of an I. So we complement each other in that way. But I share that because like I'm going to either accept it and like control what I can control, influence what I can influence, and let go of what I can't do anything with. And so I let go of that a long time ago. And now it didn't mean that I didn't get mad when there were suspensions over bullshit. Like, sorry, maybe I shouldn't say that. But like in all reality, like there were nonsense, like equipment would break because it would be really, really old, and they'd suspend their people for it. For what? Like, are you kidding me? You didn't maintain your equipment, and now you're taking away from our family's food on the table. So yeah, I could still get mad, but I couldn't be betrayed, because I can't be betrayed by somebody who never has my trust. Now, the issue with that is that unlike the private industry where you can go and laterally move for comparable pay, or at least even move and then look for more pay, because if you're going to leave one company, move to another, you'd make more. Once you hit a certain point in time, you're kind of stuck. You're stuck because you don't want to take a 70% pay cut, be low person on the totem pole, like all of those things. So you're not going to do that. And they got you. And so like that to me is very hard. And I think when it comes down to forgiveness, I think for me personally, and we can only always speak for ourselves. For me personally, when it comes down to forgiveness, I share that with David. I can't forgive people that commit unfathomable acts. That doesn't work for me. But I think that if we can move to acceptance that that's the reality, then it allows me to process and move forward. And I think acceptance is really different than forgiveness, because I'm sorry, the people that flew the plane into that building, they will never earn my forgiveness. But can I accept that it happened and then move on for me and be able to figure out how to move forward for me? I could do that. And I think that that's like on a very broad, like horrific level. Like our friends who just lost everything in the tornado, like 2 days ago, they're alive, thank God, right? But I'm not like, you're in stages, like we're in stages of shock, like, because it's so fresh and raw. But I'm not like, I can't forgive Mother Nature. Like that's like the wrong thing to say. But like, we can say, okay, like at a certain point in time, you process and you can get to the point where you like accept for what it is and then figure out how to move on. And I just think that like, if we keep putting ourselves stuck in like wishing for something that will never be, will never help us heal and move on, in my opinion.
And that was my problem. As things didn't transpire the way I wanted them to through my career, I was always hoping that the next opportunity would be different, and or the next scenario would be different. And it wasn't. My bio as read, and as you guys have seen it on LinkedIn through the promotion of today, I had a lot of opportunities and a lot of awesome things. I had some great experiences, and as a police officer was able to be incredibly influential in the community that I served, which is truly the impact I set out to have to begin with. So that fulfilled that goal for me. However, there were other things that I would have wanted to do that I wasn't provided the opportunity for because I wasn't their guy. And so I always hoped that would continue to change. And like Chris, with your situation, knowing what I know and how that went down, especially more recently than originally, I would, and I hate being this pessimistic, I would struggle with the ability to move on from it. I know that's my personality. Should you? Absolutely. Would it be beneficial to you? Absolutely. How you do that, man, you're a better man than I if you can. So sorry, I don't have better advice.
No, I think that it was great to put it out there, because I think, Stephanie, you came at it from a completely different angle with the acceptance rather than the forgiveness. And that's a great point. For me, I very much recognize and kind of follow the same principles you do, as far as like accepting what I can and change what I can and what I can't just deal with. Not always the same for the spouses. She tells me all the time, you know what, dude, you need to quit. I don't know why the hell you go back to work. But for your 20-year career, David, and Stephanie, your support of that 18 years, which I think you've probably done more for it than he has, that to have that courage to keep driving forward despite all those things, because your mission, David, was to help others and have that impact on your community, which you were able to do for those 20 years. So I commend you for being able to put that. Maybe you didn't forgive, but you were able to, like your wife said, accept it and keep driving on and having a positive impact on folks. And like we talked about, if we have that mission focus on helping others and being selfless, who knows when that clock's up, right? It might not end in 20 years, it might end at 2 years. But once you fulfilled your purpose in that time frame, I think that's a huge win. So thank you both for sharing.
No, I think it is a huge win. And like I said, in reference to the picture from 9/11, you just never know when you're going to close that circle. And to quit is not in my DNA. And I don't think it's in any of our DNAs. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here having this conversation. It's not something that I'm programmed to do. I need to get to the end of that mission to call it complete. And going back to the original purpose of being here today, that mission became complete when I handed over that picture. And it allowed me to have that moment of closure 18 some odd years later. And I think it's important to recognize that you just never know when that closure is going to come. And if you quit, you'll never get there. So that's, for me, quitting is never an option.
That's great. Well,
I see
listen,
Shannon there.
yeah. Shannon, do you want to close out unless somebody else has anything else to say? Why don't we close out with Shannon asking his question or statement?
Guys, Stephanie, Chris, David, this is my first day hearing of you. I stay pretty close to my foxhole, but man, I'm doing everything I can not to break down and cry right now, because man, I hear, Stephanie, your side of the story. Dave and Chris, I hear what you're saying. The question I have for you is how have you protected your children, and how did you share that with them in a way that emboldened them and raised them up instead of tore them down? I'm sorry, guys. Y'all are just, I thought I went through some crap. Holy crap.
So awesome question. And number one, it didn't make you cry bad. So I'm glad I did. I'm glad we did. And thanks for being that vulnerable with us. That's what this is all about. That's an awesome question. And the whole kid conversation is huge. For us, Stephanie and I together have vowed never to hold anything back from our kids. I think it's about how you curate the information and present it to them that makes it appropriate or age appropriate, but holding back from any of the information, I think, is personally inappropriate. If they don't know who you are, they don't know who you are. And how do you raise a child in your own house if they don't know who you are? They need to understand you as a person, not just a parent. And that's just kind of our philosophy. And we never held anything back. Our conversations at the dinner table, and I'll blow up Stephanie here for a second. She was in professional, I shouldn't say professional, corporate marketing for 20 years of her career. And now she's out on her own with her own company. But for the last 12 years of her career, she worked for the Trojan company. So she was brand marketer for condoms, vibrators, and lubes. And I was a cop that did stuff that you shouldn't tell your kids about. But at our dinner table, there were no secrets. And yes, the information was curated, but there's nothing they didn't know and nothing they didn't hear. We didn't ever hid anything from them. And we were always open to answer any questions that they had. We just never hid anything from them. And I think that they're left without any curiosity because of it. And the same way, if you talk to your kids about drugs or alcohol as or even firearms, at a very young age, they're not curious about it. So they're not going to, when I don't really carry a weapon much anymore in the retirement days, but I'd come home from work and put my gun on the kitchen counter and not think twice about it. And neither did the kids. So if they walk into a friend's house, they're not going to go, what's that thing? Is that a dart gun? And, and kill their friend standing across the table from them. It just doesn't entertain them. It doesn't entertain their curiosity to know something about or figure something out that they don't already know, because we tell them everything we know. We hide nothing. And for us, that's worked. I would never tell anybody else how to raise their child. But I think from experiences that Stephanie and I have had as adult children, learning things as adult from, a parent that you didn't know for your entire life, you're like, are you serious right now? And learning, something so influential about your own parents when you're now an adult. I just think it creates a distrust between a parent and child. And I can't imagine having that lack of transparency with my own kids and them at some day not trusting me that I didn't tell them something.
So true, so true. And David, at some point you should move your American flag and they can see all the things on my side of the wall behind that. But there you go. He's outed. But in reality, like so yes to everything David said. And the other part that I would add to that is I think life, like, as we mentioned, is a collection of experiences. And so we were never the parents that said, oh, I have a baby, I can't go do that. Or like, oh, we can't take our kid there or whatever. Like we just did it differently. We built in, they napped on the go, and I always had snacks in my bag, and I'm a master planner and like all those things, like in Girl Scouts motto, be prepared for everything. Right. So, I think that at the end of the day, like we didn't hold them back from anything. Like, Dave rides the police unity tour into Washington, DC each year. Like my kids have been down to the memorial countless number of times. They've seen and had their own experiences through their own eyes. So it's not just a story at the dinner table. It's also, what they've lived. And I know David's fear is that he retired when they were too young to maybe remember. I mean, our kids are now 14, 12, and almost 8. So what our daughter will remember will be more through stories than through the experiences of seeing her father as a police officer. And I know, David, you are concerned about that, but I think that it's part of her story. She is a law enforcement family member. Like she'll always be a part of that because the experiences of being a law enforcement family are continued, because even if you're retired, you were still introduced today as a retired police officer. It's still part of your identity. It's how you see yourself. And it's how not only you see yourself, but it's how the world sees you. So I think she'll have those experiences. And look, we never know what we do, but I think there's a difference between impact and intent. And we've had positive intentions, and we've lived and made choices along the way. And we are just hopeful that it has the positive impact, because we're still raising them. They're still children, right? I mean, I guess we're always little children, but they're still under our roof. And we have a roof to put for them. So thankful for that too.
And I love what Papa Ron said about, your children said that you never raised children, you raised adults. And I kind of feel that we're in that same boat. And just a quick anecdote I would share in reference to all that is last year, as the kids went back to school, our then 13-year-old, who's now 14, in the midst of all of the media hype of the BLM movement, they had a discussion in their classroom. I don't remember exactly how it started, but he got called out as a racist because I'm a cop. And I think, but not for our candor and our honesty on a regular basis with him, he would not have known how to handle that situation. He would have not have had the confidence to handle that situation, and he wouldn't have had the facts on how to handle that situation. And I'm so proud of the way he did handle it. And, in a more eloquent way than I can do it, told the kid to go F himself. And, it's put the kid back on his heels, and, with fact-based information was like, dude, you're just completely out of your league right now. And that is a benefit. And I'll never pat myself on the back as a parent, because the Lord knows we screw up plenty. For every good thing that comes out, we have 100 screw ups to back that up. But that's the one thing that I'll say, like, because of our candor and not hiding anything from him, that was the example of why we do what we do with our kids.
Yeah,
30 seconds, I think it comes down to authenticity, right?
Yeah.
If you have to let your kids see you go through these heartaches, otherwise they'll never know how to handle it, right? Otherwise, it's just a bunch of words, and you're not seeing, you're not mentoring your kids to see you suffer through it. I'm very clear with my kids and my struggles that I go through, and letting them see that there's a positive way to handle it and not let it overtake you.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, guys, I hear you. My oldest just turned 29 a couple days ago. He has 5 kids, and my son and my daughter-in-law that are both police officers, they have 7 kids. and it's just like,
You're bored in Oklahoma, huh?
well, it is what it is. We're not, I joke with my
Building
son.
Oklahoma. He's building Oklahoma.
Building Oklahoma.
Well, it was my goal to have my own squad, my own platoon. And, it's funny that, Papa Ron, my grandkids call me Poppy, because I poppy that butt when they start acting up. But it was just, guys, I could talk to y'all about this all day long, but Sara, David, Stephanie, Papa, Chris, guys, thank you.
Yeah, Shannon, they call me Papa Ron, that because I'm think the oldest guy in the room. But no, and I take that with a badge of honor. We got 13 grandkids, my wife and I. So we did, but we do allow our kids to experience it as children, not force them to respond to it as adults. And I think that's a different perspective there for our kids. Is I expect my children don't have the experience. I'm at level 64. So my grandchildren and children don't have the experience to have perspective from someone from level 64. So at their age, it's Nintendo. They go to the next level. So as they get to the next level, they have more experience to maybe metabolize it and experience it. So I wasn't forcing them, well, you need to act like an adult. No, you need to act like a 4-year-old that heard that your dad just messed up a car, and I let them do that. And they're not going to experience it the same way I would, just as Stephanie didn't experience it the same way you did, David. But yet it was the same precursor of events. And I tell you, I'm right there with you with betrayal. I tell you, betrayal is one of those things that just, it in the military, when you get ready to retire and you put your request in to retire, it was amazing to me. And I've had senior officers tell me how incredibly amazing it was that the lines of communication dropped to nearly zero, because they got nothing. You're not going to be doing anything for me, so I'm not investing anything in you. And it's so when you say the military do it better, they do it differently, but I don't know that better is a good way of saying it. It's like once you it's like when you turn in your notice that you're resigning, the company doesn't invest another nickel in you. I mean, you're done. They've gotten all they're going to get out of you, and it's that same humanity. And I really say, as a leader, when someone tells me they're leaving, I let them be there to the very last day. I tell them very clearly that they are worth more to me than they could ever do for me. And it frees them up to be able to, and it frees me up to be able to let them leave and really be happy that they're leaving, not because they're leaving, but that they're leaving and they've chosen to. So, yeah.
They're moving up,
They're worth more to me than they'll ever do for me.
Yeah, Fridays, I give a 6-hour brief on Fridays for the soldiers and the airmen that are getting out of the military for their VA benefits. So literally, it just so happened that I worked from home today, and my son got tested positive for COVID, so he's home today. He's 19, but guys, it has been an honor and a privilege to share your story. I look forward to, like I said, I will do my darndest to be here when I can.
Shannon, what town do you actually live in?
I'm sorry?
What town do you actually live in?
I live in Walters, Oklahoma.
Walters, okay. Because I live outside of Seneca and Neosho. So we're just almost due east and west of each other.
Yeah, I live about 20 miles south of Lawton.
Yeah.
And my wife is the nurse for the health department here in town.
All right. Well, good to meet you, neighbor.
Yes, sir.
Well, you know what? That was a great conversation. David, thank you again. That was powerful. You obviously started a great conversation because 2 hours later, we're still here. Stephanie, it was amazing to get your perspective. Through all the stories I do hear, betrayal is one that normally we don't talk about, and grief is what we don't talk about. And I think the power of our story is, just like you said about parenting, whether we're parents or we're sharing among peers, it's healing and it helps give us vocabulary for what we're going through. So you all are such a gift. Let's just keep this going. Lots of love to you and thanks again. It's great having you all.
Thank
Hey,
you,
Sarah.
Sarah. for-